Stargate SG-1 is hailed as one of the greatest science fiction television shows of all time, spanning 10 seasons, 2 movies, and prompting 2 spin-offs. That's very high praise, and as someone who's skeptical of hype, I approached the series wondering if it was going to live up to its lofty reputation. After watching it in its entirety, I'm happy to confirm the hype train is legitimate. Stargate SG-1 is an intelligent, brilliantly written, surprisingly humorous, lovingly crafted masterpiece of hard sci-fi. It follows Colonel Jack O'Neill and his team as they travel to distant planets via a device called a Stargate in search of technology and allies that can help them defeat the Goa'uld, a race of hostile parasitic aliens that pose as Egyptian gods to enslave entire planets and whom the protagonist inadvertently made enemies of in Roland Emmerich's preceding 1994 film simply titled Stargate. The film is a respectable piece of escapism with an atmosphere of intermixed wonder and danger that draws you into the story just as the Stargate draws the protagonist, and it's evident the intriguing mythology was created with care and careful consideration. The antagonist can be laughably over the top at times, but I appreciate the filmmakers fully committing to the Egyptian theme. If they had wavered, the world wouldn't have felt as established, and its world building is the film's strength. Everything else is fairly average. SG-1 does a decent job of recapping the events of the film, but if you skip that introduction to the franchise, you'll feel like you've accidentally started SG-1 at Season 2. Apart from a few casting changes and a significant tweak to the Goa'uld's origins, all the lore from the film is carried over to SG-1, and the show constructs a full-fledged universe upon those foundations. The sets, costumes, and character designs give each planet and race, even Earth and humans, a distinct look and feel. Yes, the majority of the aliens are just actors with some extra makeup and funky clothing, but SG-1's writers created an in-world reason for that, and letting a budgetary constraint inspire canon was a stroke of genius. Each race sounds different too, from handheld weapons, to spaceships, to simple everyday gadgets. The unique resonances strengthen and affirm the already effective visuals, and you're as intrigued as the protagonists when a previously unencountered technology awakens for the first time. Events, concepts, and ideologies established in early seasons still hold true in the later ones, and this dedication to consistency and continuity culminates in a universe that behaves realistically and inhabitants that feel like living people with cultures as vast as Earth's. World building. It's important. Jack O'Neill and his team are well-rounded individuals with their own aspirations, interests, and beliefs. They see situations from different perspectives and often disagree about how a crisis should be handled, but they also respect each other, admit when they're wrong, and accept responsibility for their mistakes. Earth and its allies share the same goal, but they frequently clash over the methods to achieve it. The factions that arise on Earth in response to the Stargate's discovery and the reactions from officials, scientists, and the military make you feel like you're watching a real-world simulation, for good and for ill. The antagonists' goals align with how they see the world. Their defeat is still eagerly anticipated, but their actions and decisions make sense according to their viewpoint, proving them a real threat to their protagonists. The show isn't afraid to ask tough questions of its characters or its audience, such as, should the government be hiding the existence of aliens from the public? Should Earth be involving itself in other planets' affairs? Is the fight against the Goa'uld causing more harm than good? Instead of beating the audience over the head with an opinion it demands they adopt, as is annoyingly common in modern entertainment, the show presents both sides of an issue and then lets the audience reach their own conclusion. And while SG-1 does tackle some heavy subjects, it also contains a self-aware humor that pokes fun at the very concept of the show, the sci-fi genre, and the erratic nature of a Hollywood production. That may sound like a recipe for disaster, but the humor fits like a glove. It's clever, well-timed, never overshadows the somber moments, and at its heart is a love for sci-fi. Episode 200 is a clever homage to the genre and the show's long run, and it's absolutely brilliant. I have to note the Farscape reference in that episode, as that is one of my all-time favorite TV shows, and it's also absolutely brilliant, and you should totally watch that too. Swearing in SG-1 is minimal, and the characters sound more intelligent for its lack. An alien race is stated to have no gender, but it's only discussed once and then never mentioned again. Sexual content is minimal, with the majority of it implied or taking place off-screen, and that is a breath of fresh air. However, there is one big caveat to that. The pilot has been re-edited once or twice since it first aired, but if you find yourself watching the original, there is a scene that contains full frontal nudity. From my understanding, those shots are only present in the original pilot and have been cut from the re-edited versions, but I'm not sure which versions exist where. The DVD sets I have do include those shots, so proceed with caution regarding the pilot. All this being said, SG-1 isn't perfect. The slow burn approach to its overarching conflicts and lore absolutely pays off in the long run, but most of its first season is a meandering Planet of the Week show. This is where the hype train steered me wrong. My expectations were very high, but SG-1's initial forays didn't inspire confidence that it could fulfill its reputation for the promise of its pilot. It does find its footing in the last 2/3 of the season and suddenly gets good, but it definitely takes too much time getting there. The show becomes repetitive due to the protagonist's quest to defeat the Goa'uld, spanning 8 of its 10 seasons. The finales deliver epic confrontations that keep you glued to the screen, but you would like to see the protagonist's efforts produce more results, or for them to go on the offensive instead of reacting to whatever new method the Goa'uld have thought up to attack Earth. SG-1 also has a habit of ending its episodes abruptly. A lot of time will be spent building to the climax, and then the episode will finish with said climax without showing the resolution. You do get used to it, but it never stops being a little jarring. The last 2 seasons lean heavily into the evil religious zealots trope. Yes, horrible things that are not of God have been done in God's name. Not denying that. However, Western entertainment disproportionately portrays the people that believe in a higher power as the villain, despite secular ideologies resulting in horrible things too. But credit where credit is due, SG-1 does clearly state that those who are claiming to be gods are not gods, and the conflict with the zealots is a natural progression of a subplot that has been weaved throughout the series. Having the trope front and center is a significant downgrade in the writing, though, especially since it's not balanced with the counterargument for God's existence and the positives of that belief. The show had previously presented both sides of an issue and allowed the audience to reach their own conclusions, but it obviously favors one here. These criticisms are more nitpicks than actual issues and don't detract from an otherwise great show, unless you find the religion bad trope as annoying as I do. It did sour the later seasons for me, unfortunately. Speaking of later seasons, the first of the spin-offs, Stargate Atlantis, premiered alongside SG-1's 8th season and aired concurrently with the flagship show until its end. Stargate Atlantis follows an expedition team that makes a one-way trip through Earth's Stargate to a deserted alien city in the Pegasus Galaxy. They inadvertently awaken the galaxy's oppressors, the Wraith, from hibernation, and their only hope of defeating them is to restore the abandoned city and decipher its mysteries. Much of what makes SG-1 a great show holds true for Atlantis. The world building is solid and consistent. The production design and sound department deliver a new batch of believable aliens and planets. The Wraith ships and the fact that the Pegasus Stargates sound different than the Milky Ways deserve a special mention. Sexual content and swearing are comparable to SG-1. There are a few comments about men possibly thinking they're attracted to other men, but the remarks are said in jest. The writers achieve an effective balance between allowing Atlantis to be its own show and connecting it to SG-1. Both shows reference each other's events and characters, cameos are made, and they run in the same timeline, but none of the crossover aspects are intrusive, as they present like Easter eggs. Atlantis quickly establishes its own identity and learns to stand on its own merits. It maintains the franchise's sense of humor, but it carries a darker tone than SG-1. The Pegasus Galaxy is harsh. The lines between enemy and ally blur and bend. The characters face the morally questionable decisions that arise when a threat is on your doorstep and resources and backup are in short supply or non-existent. However, Atlantis has some issues that leave its predecessor the superior show. The characters are not as fleshed out as SG-1's. They shine as a team, and in that group dynamic you see their personalities, beliefs, and values, but individually they feel flat. The exception is Rodney McKay, an egotistical scientist who is almost always the smartest one in the room and makes sure everyone knows it. He's arrogant, brash, and demeaning, but he frequently risks his own life to protect others. He recognizes his shortcomings in relating to people and regrets hurting his friends with his brusque demeanor, even though he won't openly admit to either. The other main characters do begin to emerge as individuals in the later seasons after SG-1 ended, but Atlantis was canceled before they could fully come into their own, and the movies that were supposed to continue the story never materialized, which is a shame. The main antagonists, the Wraith, are more generic villains than the Goa'uld. They're basically vampires that survive by absorbing a being's life force instead of their blood. I'm also not really into vampires, with a few exceptions, so your mileage may vary. Once the protagonists learn about the Wraith's physiology, society, and technology, which has a very fitting organic component, the vampirism becomes an aspect of the Wraith instead of their defining trait, and they receive much-needed depth to their characterization, which elevates them to their proper place as the show's main antagonists. Alas, the resolution to their conflict with the humans also became a victim of the show's cancellation. Atlantis' last season does serve as an ending to the series, but it is not a conclusion. Atlantis can be watched without viewing SG-1, but I don't recommend it. SG-1 lays a lot of groundwork and springboards Atlantis' pilot, and if you begin Atlantis without any prior knowledge of the greater Stargate universe, the references, terminology, and lore will leave you scratching your head. Since Atlantis' first 3 seasons originally aired concurrently with SG-1's last 3, the best way to experience those 6 seasons is to watch them together in some way, whether that be swapping episodes, swapping seasons, or swapping discs if you have a physical copy. You'll be able to keep track of the timeline, you'll enjoy the references and cameos, and the progression won't feel haphazard. Watching SG-1 and Atlantis simultaneously play in the same pond is also just plain fun. And then there's Stargate Universe. Ugh, this show is a mess. Now, I wouldn't normally discuss a piece of media I will never re-experience, but since this has turned into a Stargate franchise review instead of just SG-1, I'll make an exception and briefly explain why this show will not be rewatched. First, the positives. The premise. A group of civilians and military become stranded on a decrepit automated spaceship traveling through an unknown galaxy, and they have to survive while figuring out a way to return to Earth. The episodes that focus on survival and the tough decisions that have to be made in such situations are decent to fairly good. The outside threats and the mysteries of the spaceship are intriguing, and they feel like they could be part of the Stargate universe, no pun intended. The production quality and sound design continue their strong track record, with the cinematography being the standout. Unfortunately, all these pieces fail to connect. Universe comes across as a show that was proposed as an original concept but couldn't get off the ground, so it was spliced into Stargate. The show wants to be dark and edgy, and while you could have that kind of Stargate show, it would still need to feel like Stargate, and Universe does not. It tries to keep its toes in hard sci-fi while stretching as far as it can towards space opera, and the result is a show that shoves round pegs into square holes and just hopes the gaps will fill in. It sacrifices exploration, discovery, and ingenuity to focus on the character's emotional baggage. The grounded technological concepts that were so carefully thought out and consistent in SG-1 and Atlantis become mere suggestions. As long as the plot needs something to function or malfunction, it will, because such and such random reason. The characters suffer from a lack of maturity, lashing out with physical blows or emotional outbursts. They behave inconsistently and revert to their original state at the beginning of every episode. The conflicts feel contrived and forced, and often the only reason you know one exists is because the characters say it does. The audience is told more than we're shown, and then what we're shown doesn't align with what we've been told. The show jumps from episode plot to episode plot like a child without an attention span. Nothing has lasting repercussions or consequences, and therefore the show has no stakes. Universe contains more swearing than Atlantis and SG-1, but still nothing excessive. One of the main secondary characters thinks she's gay, and there is far more sexual content. It's nothing shocking by today's standards, I'd rate it PG-13, but its relatively heavy presence is a drain on the show and only highlights the loss of maturity. And don't get me started about the communication stones. On the surface, they initiate a harmless body swap that keeps the protagonist in contact with Earth. But that's not all they're used for. It's horrible, it's wrong, moving on. My criticisms seem to be shared by the original audience, for there is a definite effort to course correct some of these problems in Season 2. The show leans into its sci-fi aspects, it begins to develop a continuity, and the characters show signs of being actual adults. Unfortunately, Universe wasn't willing to fully commit to the new direction, and just when you feel like you might actually be watching a Stargate show, a disposable plot thread or an info-dumping monologue shatters the illusion. Universe is a show that had a lot of potential, but ultimately failed in its execution. By straying so far from its roots, it forgot what made Stargate special, and it lost its heart and soul in the process. Within Stargate's epic space battles and wondrous technologies are shows that celebrate humanity's ingenuity, curiosity, and refusal to give up, even when faced with insurmountable odds. We don't always make the right decisions, but we do the best we can, and SG-1 and Atlantis are hopeful we'll be wise enough to learn from our mistakes, that there will always be those who are willing to fight for freedom and to protect those who can't protect themselves. When I get around to rewatching the Stargate franchise, SG-1 will probably end up on my all-time favorite TV shows list, which is very exclusive. At the time of this review, I can count those shows on my hands. Atlantis might make the list due to its close association with SG-1, but Universe isn't going anywhere near it.